Hey guys, Chris from Average Eskate Reviews here, and I know it's been a while since I posted a video, but I've been incredibly busy over the beginning of the summer. My main channel, which is Hockey Tutorial, which is actually my main job, had me in 6 countries in 8 weeks filming. Didn't expect to be that busy over the summer, which chewed into my spare time quite a lot, and it's the reason that I've not been able to share any videos. But I'm back now, and I've still been riding, still been testing out different things like this riot pack over here from Eksate, so I've got some good videos that are going to be coming over the next few weeks. But this is of course a very impromptu video. You can see I'm at home. I've got socks on, I don't even have my shoes on for crying out loud, but I had an idea as I was about to put this riot kit on this Eksate over here. Now what that was essentially 5 main things that I wish that I knew before I bought my first electric skateboard. Now that's what I wanted to do in this video, is share some insight into what those points are to hopefully help you pick up your board, or your first board in this case. Now something I've got to mention is I'm not a pro rider, I'm not a pro skateboarder. I used to ride normal skateboards when I was in my teenage years, stopped for a number of years, found out about these electric boards from the internet, got my first one, which was a few years ago, and I've been riding ever since. If you're new to the channel, I make videos that just essentially cover my feedback on what these boards are like in the form of reviews, VS videos, comparisons, to share insight into what they're like and hopefully help you identify which one would be great for you. But let's get into this video. Let me share those 5 main points and hopefully clear up some things that you might be thinking about if you're looking to buy your first board. Now I love to split my videos up into categories. This video is no different. First one is going to be, what do you need the board for? Is it going to be for leisure purposes or commuting, which has a lot of points you need to consider. From there, it's going to be the types of boards that are out there. If it's going to be one with a flexible deck, stiff deck, a short one. Quickly from there, we'll move on to what do you need the board to be able to do in terms of its features. And then it's going to be price and the rules based on where you live. Those are things that you definitely need to consider before you pick one of these up. So with the first one being what you need the board for, if it's going to be your commute or just for some fun with some friends or summer when it's nice like today, what you need to consider there is, especially if you're using it to commute, if it's going to be your primary means of getting around a city, you want to make sure that, for example, the spare parts are available to you, they don't take too long to reach you based on where you live, and they're not too expensive. Because if you're going to be using the board every day to get to and from work or wherever you're going to, you're going to be chewing through parts, things like the wheels, the grip tape. If it's a hub-driven board, you're going to need to make sure you have replacement wheels for them because they are notoriously thin and you do need to replace them fairly frequently. If it's a belt-driven board like the Boosted Stealth over here, you need to make sure you have skid guards, which protects the belts from coming into contact with the ground when you're coming off of curbs or riding on rough surfaces. Also the belts themselves. The wheels you don't have to change as frequently, but things like grip tape and just ensuring you have all of the consumables available to you is definitely something that you want to make sure that you can do. Now this isn't something that you do when you need them. When you buy the board, you want to make sure that you have these consumable parts available to you at the same time, so you don't have to think about getting them in when you're in desperate need of them. So from there, it's also going to be how many miles are you going to be putting on the board? How far do you intend to ride it on a daily basis? This again will touch on the points I just mentioned, having those consumable parts available. And it also means that you want to make sure it's not too difficult to maintain the board itself, because if you've bought a board that's, for example, based in China, how difficult is it going to be for you to maintain the board? Should it go wrong? Should it need something to be replaced that you can't buy online for it? So these are points that you definitely want to keep in mind. If it's for leisure, of course you still want to keep these points in mind, but they're not going to be as important because it'll take you much longer to chew through the consumable parts because you're not going to be using the board as frequently. Now that takes us to types of boards. Now this is definitely going to be a big one. The first board that I bought, I thought it was great, I thought it was flawless because I didn't really have anything to compare it against, which is what I wanted to touch on in this section of the video. If you're thinking about buying a specific board, maybe there's another one that you've seen that you like the look of as well, do whatever you can to see if you can try at least 2 or 3 different boards out. Because just because you like one, if you have nothing to compare your kind of like your feedback, your first impressions of that board to, it makes it very difficult for you to know if that's going to be the right one for you, or if there's another option out there that might be much, much better for you to pick up. Now for me personally, I always prefer boards of this sort of length. I don't like the shorter ones, things like the Urban Kick that Slick Revolution make. I know those are great boards, or even the Mini X and the Mini S that Boost It make. For a very long time after the Mini S and Mini X were released, I wanted one of those for traveling with, and when I finally got to ride one just a few weeks ago in Den Haag in the Netherlands, I was completely unimpressed. The board was powerful, it was nippy, it wasn't as quick as I'd want it to be, but the length of the board felt incredibly unstable when I was riding the board at full speed. I just didn't feel like I had that much space to be able to get a good center of gravity and have good balance, but that's my personal impression of them. Now, what I mean by seeing if you can try out boards, do whatever you can. If it means asking a stranger very nicely to have a go of their board, it's definitely worth trying to do this, because I would have just bought the Mini X or the Mini S online, and when it arrived and I actually took it out and had a go, I'd have been very disappointed. But the fact that I was able to ride it allowed me to see what it felt like, to know that having those shorter bases or the shorter decks on a board is just not for my personal preference. Now, of course, as you look at the different options of decks that are available, they'll have different performance benefits. If it has a kicktail, it's going to be very nippy for you to get around a city. You can tic-tac-toe in and out of places. If it has a much longer deck like this, if you get to a sharp turn, you can try and tic-tac-toe. It just doesn't work as well if you don't have a kicktail. It means you have to stop, pick the board up, put it down and keep going. So it's just weighing up these different features and different options that are available to see which one is going to be best for you. But the only way that you're going to truly know what works is to do whatever you can to test these types of boards out in the environment that you'd ride them in, to see what they're like, to see if it's going to be the right thing for you to pick up. But just on a personal note, what I prefer to have is a longboard style deck, flexible because it really eats up a lot of the vibrations and rough terrain that you might be riding over, and it's just generally more comfortable to ride as you're going on longer trips. I actually have 2 batteries for this particular board over here, so it means that I can get about 14 miles at full speed with this board over here, which is great. And that's why I like a flexible deck, because it's much more comfortable for me. I feel like I have much more control over a board like this. Now, with stiff decks like the Eksate X1 Pro over here, it's not to say that you don't have control, it's just a different type of board. It has a completely different feel, and this is definitely something that I wish that I knew when I was looking at different boards. I didn't realize that because a board has a flexi deck, I didn't know how much of an impact that made on how the board feels to ride. It was only when I went to the Boost It board and then switched back to an Eksate and some of the other boards that I've tried, like the Evolves, that you notice a massive difference in the way that it feels. A stiff deck doesn't feel bad, it's just a stiff deck, that's what it is. But for me, my personal style is, after riding this particular deck on the Boost It Stealth and going back to the Eksate, I feel like I have so much more control and I feel so much safer, so much more in control of the board with this one over here, the Stealth with a flexible deck, than I do with a stiff deck like the Eksate X1 Pro. But again, personal preference. You're not going to know these two different things unless you try both of these different styles of deck out to figure out which one is the best option for yourself. But I've got to say, that's not to take away from this board. In my opinion, the Eksate X1 Pro is still hands down the best board you can get for less than £1,000, but the style of deck, it being very, very stiff, is something that I'm personally not used to. I'm much more partial to a flexible deck. Now, the next main point is going to be what you need the board to be able to do in terms of its features. Comfort, speed, range, charge time, servicing, all of these points are definitely something that you want to consider. I'm going to straight away say that if you're in the UK and you're trying to figure out which board to get, I would suggest Slick Revolution, Boost It, Evolve, or Eksate. Now, why I say that is because if you're in the United Kingdom, these manufacturers have service centers either in the UK or very accessible to the UK. Boost It's closest service center at this moment in time is in the Netherlands, and Boost It organise free shipping for your board to be collected and taken to the Netherlands for repairs, replacements, anything that you can't do yourself at home. Slick Revolution, Eksate and Evolve all have places in the UK to be able to have your board serviced and repaired. So it means that if you have an issue with your expensive skateboard, you can send it somewhere in the UK. I'm not sure if it's free to do it with those companies, so you'll have to check yourself, but you can send it to somewhere in the UK that it can be repaired and you can get it back, rather than having to send an email to a Chinese company and never hear back from them about something that you've purchased from them. So that's 100% something that I'd mention. It's not always best to go with the cheapest option if you're really looking to use the hell out of one of these things and you're using it either for commuting or leisure. It doesn't matter what it is. If you want to buy something that's reliable, you want to invest your money in something that's not going to be a waste, make sure you buy from a company that has a good track record with when something goes wrong, how do you get it resolved? That's definitely something that you need to base your choice on. And of course, where you live will definitely affect that. Now, some of the other points that I mentioned was comfort, range, and speed, and of course charge time. Now, why these are important is because some boards can take 2 hours, 3 hours, even 4 hours to charge. Others can take 45 minutes or maybe an hour and a half. Depending on the range that you need the board to be able to do, for example, my boosted board will do roughly 6.2 miles at full speed on a full battery. That's generally what I get out of it the way I ride it. My commute normally is between 4 to 5 miles at the moment right now, so it means that I can do that easily on one charge. But if I get to my office and I need to go somewhere else in the city, maybe 2-3 mile ride, how long am I going to be waiting for the board to charge up so I can do that? Now, roughly at the minute, it's somewhere between an hour and 15 to an hour and 25 minutes for a full charge, which suits me quite well. But I know boards like the Evolves take about 2.5 hours to charge unless you have the fast charger, which I think reduces the time by about an hour or so, but please don't quote me on that. So that's definitely something you want to consider. Aside from that, for me, range and speed are something that I really want. I want to get the quickest board, but has decent range as well. Now, the Eksate is fast, but the range can be very temperamental on it. It's same with the booster. It's a pretty quick board, but the range is not as great as I would want it to be. I know boards like Evolve definitely have greater range and also pretty good speed, but something that you definitely need to note is never base your choices on which board you're going to go with based on the spec that you read on the website. Because again, if you look at these two boards over here, the Eksate X1 Pro and the Boosted Stealth, they have very, very similar specs in some cases, but when you actually ride them, the performance, the feel, and what you actually get in reality versus what's displayed on the website is completely different. So you really need to keep that in mind. It's why I can't stress, do whatever you can to try these boards out before sinking your money into them. Of course, watch videos on YouTube and see what people have said about the range, the actual speed that you're getting, and what it's like to live day to day with one of these boards. Don't base your choices off of specs that you read online, because you look at a £500 board and a £1,000 board, the specs will be very similar, but what you actually get and the performance of the board and the actual experience that you get when you're riding the board are completely different things. That leads us really nicely onto the price of the board. Depending on how much you spend, it comes down to the first point that I touched on in the video, which is if it's for work, commuting, or if it's just for leisure. You need to figure out how reliable a board you want, what you need the board to be able to do, and then that will dictate the price you need to spend. It's better to go in looking at the features that you need, what you need the board to be able to do, what type of board you're after, and then try and tailor that around the price, rather than saying you want to spend £1,000 or dollars, or you want to spend £500 or dollars. What can you get for that kind of money? It's better to look at the features that you need and then figure out how much you're going to have to spend to be able to get them. I think that's the best way to do it if you're serious about this. Last point is going to be the rules. Definitely check the rules in your country, in your city, before you pick up a board, because you might find out that they're illegal. Right now in the UK, to my knowledge, these are not illegal. There's not really any rules about them. There's some grey areas, there's some cities that people get trouble, some of the cities where people have no trouble at all. So definitely find out what the rules are like. I'm going to say as a side note, regardless of what happens with these boards, I've invested far too much time and money into them. Regardless of what gets ruled in the UK, I'm still riding this to work. I dare anyone to try and stop me, but it's still definitely worth checking before you buy, so you don't pick something up that might be effectively useless in the city that you live in. But hopefully these points have helped shed light on some of the things that you need to consider before you buy one of these boards. Of course, there's a bunch of videos that I've done, like a Boosted Stealth review, which is down below in the description, an Eksate X1 compared to the Boosted video as well, which will be down below in the video description, as well as a bunch of other videos that are going to be coming out, including what the riot kit for the Eksate X1 Pro is like. This is what turns the Eksate X1 from a hub motor board into a belt-driven board, which I'm really looking forward to sharing some insight on. But hopefully this video has helped you out. Make sure you thumbs up, you subscribe so you can stay up to date with the latest videos that I post. And obviously the social media pages will be down below if you want to keep up to date with me on Instagram. I post there much more regularly on this channel over here, but of course that's going to be changing over the next few weeks. But thank you very much for watching, guys, and take care till the next one. Peace.